Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. Yes, it's Where Are You? Altered reality. No, what is it? It's augmented reality, right? Quick word, as always, about, I just got a call, and you know what? I'm pretty sure it was ZipDX. Is that possible? No, let's see. And somebody left a message. All right, we'll get that in a minute. Kamailio World, we're almost there. We're May 3rd, and it's May 6th through 8th. May 7th, we'll be doing a virtual reality thing. I'm going to select a couple people so that they can tell me whether the focus is working, because the focus was focus last week. It was focus. If you see what I'm saying, I see what I did there. Well, let's see. Andy isn't here. We'll start with Corrado Mella. Corrado, welcome and hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
So now somebody see if the focus is changing. We got Jay Carpenter coming up. Jay Carpenter in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Jay.
Hello.
Hello,
Kamailio World looks focused to me.
Yeah, well, that's me. Oh, yeah. Well, you shouldn't be. You should be seeing whatever you want by clicking. And Michael Graves, of course.
Yes, the focus is changing. I'm seeing it on my phone.
Oh, because you're looking on your phone. All right. In that case,
yeah. And on VUC.me, we are okay.
Okay, thank you, guys. Which means that we can move to hopefully this. Yeah, look at that. We're too close.
Yeah, that was a bit too
way
close.
too close. Too close for comfort. Let's back up with my famous remote controlled. Yeah, but then you see the light switch here, which is not cool either. I don't have my ticket to Mars covering the light switch, and I don't have a hat hung up there. Whoop. Anyway, augmented reality, virtual reality, that's a kind of a preview of Kamailio World. We're going to be doing that Tuesday, the 7th afternoon. That'll all be videoed and shown, and we'll be having a discussion about that. Gee, I wish there was a way to scoop the rest of the crowd here, Jay and Michael and Andy in, but I don't think we've thought of a way to do that yet, because we don't do a live hangout from Kamailio World. Anyway, Corrado, you had a story. We were starting to talk about augmented reality, and I mentioned, and I forgot to queue up the screen share that I did earlier today, that if you go to Google Maps and you ask for walking directions to a place, there is an icon that says, I think it just marked AR with a funny symbol. But if you point it asks for camera access, and if you point your camera at the street, it starts to do its thing. Unfortunately, when I did it, the first thing it says is if you start walking, it detects that and says point your camera at the ground and look at where you're going, which is good. It's true, and it's a good thing. I'll try to cue this up while Corrado's telling the story about Lens, which is another Google product that you could feed, because we are all digital sharecroppers. So let's feed Google with all this information, and then they can use it for AI.
Yeah.
Corrado, tell the story of Lens, though, because I've used it, and a lot of people, it's been around for over a year, I think, maybe 2 years. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's a feature that is a bit underused. If you have your camera on, there's a small icon on the left-hand side that is a square with a circle inside, and that's the Google Lens. And if you point your camera to things, it usually detects what it is, logos, devices, objects, and things, but doesn't just do that. You can highlight text and launch any kind of features you can do with text, including translation. So yesterday, we and my family were having Swedish meatballs, those things you can have at IKEA with all the trimmings, including lingonberry sauce and that brown sauce that they do. Unfortunately, this time the packages were in Swedish, and the wife was not remembering what dosages of water and milk you had to use to do the sauce, because it's just a powder. So I pointed my phone camera to that, used Lens, and highlighted the text and went to translate it, and Google translated the text. So it's some sort of augmented reality or access to multiple functions. But I just did a couple of experiments very quickly here, and you get brought on websites if you point at a logo of something. So it's another way of searching, but also possibly if you get the picture of a building, you can possibly have access to all the information about the building. It's not augmented reality in the sense that it's superimposed on what you're looking at. That is the core of augmented reality. But I think there is a feature, if I'm not mistaken, in Google Street View that is an add-on to Google Maps that does what Randy was saying before. So if you point at something with Google Street View and the augmented reality add-on or layer enabled, it should give you pointers and clickable links or icons that you can go in and get indications, are also travel indications. So I think it could be possibly, it's some sort of augmented reality or augmented features that I don't think they are very much used right now. And they are in our pockets, and it's a bit of a waste not to have them and not to use them, because it ends up to be one of the many features and services that Google bins and puts in the graveyard because it's not being used as it should be.
Well, sometimes they do that. I mean, a lot of people really liked Inbox, and that did the same. So here's
Inbox practically died because many of the much used features in Inbox went directly into the non-standard.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people liked it for some reason. I didn't care one way or the other. Anyway, here I'm showing the icon in case anybody wants to try this. When you're asking for walking directions, and I'll show you what it looks like, even though there's nothing really glorious that I've got here, but just as an example, and I have to move this around to show. So the bottom curved part there, you see the normal maps. Wow. You see the maps, and then here's the AR, which is giving the name of the next street up. You can see that it says preview. In fact, I'm probably breaking the agreement by showing this, but whatever. I'm sure they're not going to arrest me. Anyway, this is something that everybody should try, because I meant to try it, and I will try it later today. But when I went to the store, I totally forgot. You need to be on a street that has a bunch of stuff, and I assume it's going to start showing you, like the supermarket on your left and so on. But right now, you just see that blue balloon that says that the street that I'm trying to get to is in front of me. Very cool. And I wish I had the warning where it says, now that you're walking, point your phone down and look where you're going, basically, which is kind of cool.
Could I make a comment?
Absolutely. Somebody has to.
So I'd like to just step back and set a little context here over what we just covered in the last 3-4 minutes. We just heard from a fellow who's Italian, living in Scotland, talking about translating a Swedish recipe using a device, something like this. And we're talking on a communication platform that's connecting people in Europe, the United States, and could be connecting people anywhere. I'd just like to pause and just kind of set that context as to how unbelievable this experience would have been, 5-10 years ago. 10 years ago, we would have been gasping. And now it's just an everyday thing.
Very, very true. Very, very true. And also, I know that there's a device. There's a way to get a spontaneous on-device translation, audio, and where you could speak German or Italian into it, and it will, or maybe somebody else speaks to you, and it might show that just the text. I'm not sure about that.
I think it's a feature of Google Assistant. You ask Google Assistant to translate what you're saying in the language you want.
Well, we can test. Damn it, we can test that real quick by. But I think didn't I do something with this last week? Let's see. What if I say, first of all, speak to me in Italian.
In Italian, you would say,
Parlarmi.
Hey, that's okay. It understood that I was trying to get it to say, make me a risotto in Italian. I didn't pronounce it right. Do I have to hit the microphone? No. Speak to me in German. Okay, there's something with it. Oh, here we go. So, could you say, I would like a risotto in Italian? Oh, so it comes up with a display. I don't know. Somebody else try something.
So just one other point about what we're talking about. How much are we paying for all these services?
Our lives, our attention, which is the biggest economy, you know.
Yeah.
Our own personal information.
Our health, well, that's nothing. Nobody cares about.
No, I get it, but the monetary transaction is zero. So
That's debatable, but yes, there is no.
No, there is no fee that we
There's
are
no
paying
fee
right now.
directly. No. Well, actually, there is if you're using their paid services, which I do. But right now, we're getting this free, so that enabled us to have a completely screwed up edition last week because it's free. So there was no recourse to the focus issue. Anyway, that's AR. What about VR? Who has experience in VR? I just read a long article about the new Oculus standalone mask, or whatever you call it, visor, that was by Lance Ulanoff, I think, who's a famous tech writer, and he loved it. He thought it was great. That's a $400 unit that weighs a little over a pound, by the way. Be mindful of that when you put that on your head. So I don't know. Anyone have experience with that? Probably not with that one, but maybe the earlier stuff. And the earlier stuff is really bad compared to this newer generation. Has anybody used visors of any kind ever? Jay?
I have, yeah. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal in multiple dimensions. Number one is basically we could be experiencing almost anything, anywhere, at any time, from any place via virtual reality. And number two is that we don't actually need the physical kinetics in order to trick our brain into thinking that what's happening is real. For example, I went to a virtual reality basically set up in a mall, and where they had these chairs sitting around and people were getting into the chairs and putting on the headsets and doing different virtual reality experiences. And this fellow in front of me, who's about middle-aged and, you know, a man bigger than me, looked pretty healthy. He gets in to one of these little pods, and in a very short time, he is waving his arms. He's throwing the headset off. He's getting out of this slightly moving pod, and he's basically had enough. And I'm standing there in line behind him going, wow, look at that weakling. I get in, put on the headset, go on a roller coaster ride. I was nauseous for the next 2 hours. It was amazing. So, you know, let's say the platform, not only is it completely malleable where we can create pretty much anything, but we can also trick our brains into thinking that we're actually in that particular experience.
That is the most problematic thing with virtual reality, that the disconnect between your visual perception and physical perception is so deep that you instantly get nauseous, and you get that disconnect tricks your brain and your amygdala. It goes completely in overload, and it's unbearable. Even for the slightest motion, if the VR action is too much for the motion you do. If it's not perfectly tailored, so if it moves 5 degrees more than it should when you turn your head, the disconnect between your action and your vision is going to create a big problem. And that is something that might reduce the adoption of virtual reality very much, whereas augmented reality, where you see through a pair of transparent glasses, is safer. Let's say safer.
There's another interesting twist on this, which comes from a different angle, because to this point you've considered only the visual, and sort of what your gut feels or your sense of balance is very connected to your visual sense. But then there's also the acoustics, what you hear, and there's quite a group of people, a very large group of researchers actually working on head tracking, so that your acoustic perspective can track your head position. And what you end up with is you're wearing the goggles, but you have the earphones on, and you need precise tracking of what you're hearing. So when you turn, if there was a siren to your right, as you turn away from it, it needs to, the visual of the police car, the siren in the game or whatever it was, needs to track from an auditory perspective what the visual is, or you'll end up with the same kind of disconnect. You end up with this sort of, you dilute the experience to the point where you end up with sensory problems like the roller coaster that Jay described. I think all of this is coming together. I would ask Jay, when you were doing this, did you do it? Were you using like a mobile phone in a headband kind of thing, or were you using something more like a Magic Leap or an Oculus, a kind of a dedicated thing?
It was more like an Oculus. So actually had this set on my face that, with a band. And I was also in a little pod that would mimic motion to a small degree. But the bigger problem was this roller coaster ride I was on was moving way too fast, just from the animation of it. And even if the pod this little cocoon thing that I was in with an open front hadn't been moving slightly, I think I would have still experienced the same nausea that I did. So anyway.
I'm very interested in Chris Matthews' latest thing, because he's taken his sort of ambient computing technology and joined or been purchased by Magic Leap. And so the idea there being, you need a fair amount of compute capability, not just what's on the headset necessarily, because those have to be portable, but you need sort of whatever compute you can bring to it to be connected to the player's experience or the user's experience. And Magic Leap has gotten to the point where they were selling to developers sort of higher end dev kits, and people were playing with it. And now literally, what is it, Epic Games is giving away 5,000 Magic Leap kits to developers to get them to move the games onto the platform. That's, I think, quite telling. They're definitely on the cutting edge.
Telling in what way?
Well, we're moving towards kind of a realizable end user experience, as opposed to something that's esoteric and experimentalists tinkering. They're trying to productize, basically. But when it's $2,500 for the dev kit, and that was one headset and the belt pack that went with it, that's a fair amount of money. I mean, that's not your average Xbox, right? And I don't know what the market is for that. That the developer market is fine, but that's not high school kids. We're not quite at the Matrix yet.
Another thing that probably affects virtual reality quite a lot is the fact that the bandwidth required to have a good reproduction of the virtual reality that is lifelike, you need a lot of bandwidth, both computational in the device you have in front of you, and connecting from either the computer that is generating that. So without cabling, at the moment, the Wi-Fi we have available probably is the speed and the computational, the bandwidth we have available between a central unit doing the computation and the device we have in front of our eyes is insufficient to deliver to a group experience or a large number of participants. So it risks to be quite a lonesome experience if you're not connected to wires, and wires are, when you are battling lightsaber battle, quite a problem. But with Wi-Fi 6 that we are looking at gigabit, it's possibly opening up the possibility to deliver frame rates and resolution in front of our eyes on wireless devices that can open up virtual reality with good resolution, a good reproduction, and then quick movement. So that should reduce the amount of lag and reduce the amount of nausea you can get.
Okay.
I've been trying. Sorry, I just wanted to show, because in contradiction to what you just said, Corrado, there's that this new device which nobody knows much about, but it just came out. It's the Oculus Quest, and the device does all of the work. You have to set it up with a phone and a Facebook account, but other than that, it's all on board. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, but that's a beast. That's huge.
Here's the question I have. And I'm seeing two different directions in technology space, and I'm observing this, and I'm questioning kind of what's going to go. I'm seeing there's a lot of enthusiasm for Wi-Fi 6. I think that's justified. I think Wi-Fi 6 is sort of next generation, it's evolution. I think the branding is unfortunate, and I think the Wi-Fi consortium should be beaten about the head and neck for deliberately being confusing. But that's neither here nor there, really. On the other hand, there's a monumental amount of hype, and I'm hearing this from all kinds of people, non-technical people especially, about 5G. And there is sort of a practical reality that is lost on lay folks, and that all wireless networks are in fact connected to wired networks. There's no such thing as a properly wireless network, right? You got to backhaul somewhere. So what I'm wondering about is, what's really the enabling mechanism? Is Wi-Fi 6 the enabling mechanism, and we're just going to need more bandwidth into homes and buildings and whatnot by whatever means, and or is 5G the enabling mechanism, because we're going to be sort of geographically independent, and we're just going to hope that the carriers can deliver upon the hype, which it looks like by the way they won't.
Yeah. So, Michael, did you see Dean Bubley's thread this last week on 5G?
I did not, but Houston is an early 5G rollout city, so I've been monitoring people around the neighborhood here who've been getting it installed, and the practical reality is not living up to the hype. Of course, the hype is it's going to cure all things. It's going to allow what it was somebody was saying, doctors to do remote operations into rural areas and all of that, and maybe someday, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, that was Dean's point, was very much along those lines, is that you've got all this sort of hype that, as best I can determine, 5G is simply a mesh network. And the fundamental problem is that if you have a mesh network, it has to be ubiquitous. It has to be completely interoperable. And yet, in the legacy fashion of enterprise in the communication space, each carrier or group or whatever has taken it upon themselves to inject some sort of proprietary element that basically kills the interoperability. And therefore,
because everybody wants to have their own special sauce, right? Everybody
well,
thinks
they also want their
add
own.
value.
They also want their traditional, subscriber type revenues. And so anyway, I'm not an expert on 5G by any means, but in looking through Dean's well-constructed thread on 5G, it sort of confirms some suspicions that I had that 5G is optimistic at best.
Well, and yes, I think, and what I can tell you from what's going on here is 5G. It actually, the current reality is, because Verizon has installed it in our neighborhood and in several surrounding neighborhoods, and they've set it up in such a fashion that you basically have to get an appointment with an engineer or technician to come out and see if you can get it, even if it's available in your neighborhood. Because of the frequencies involved, they have to come out, do a site survey, and determine whether from a location at a window of your home, they can reach their nearest fixed transmit site. We used to call them towers, but they're not really towers. They're much smaller than that. But the distances are quite small. They're not, they don't go long distances, and they don't penetrate things like windows. So they have to put an exterior antenna on the outside of your house and then run a wire into your house, and then there's a Wi-Fi transponder. So it's 5G to Wi-Fi 6, let's say, give them the benefit of the doubt, which is great. It reminds me of Sprint's fixed wireless service, which was based on WiMAX. They used to have WiMAX on one of the very tall buildings downtown, and you could get fixed wireless from them in the early days of 4G. And that worked pretty well at data rates that you would expect for 4G. What I don't see, though, is all the backhaul infrastructure, and I see a lot of people being quite upset about how many of these little installations, because they need they need them on literally every block or two. They're quite frequent.
So is the Verizon 5G compatible with the AT&T and the Sprint 5G and Cox 5G and all that stuff?
It is.
Or are they
the technology is similar, but they're all on different frequencies, because they all have different licensed bands, and the technology can be deployed from 600 megahertz up to 60 gigahertz, and some of them, like around here, it's 28 gigahertz that Verizon is rolling out, and 28 gigahertz, 600 feet, you're done.
So if you install a 5G device on your home that's Verizon, and then you decide, hey, I want to go with AT&T, does somebody have to come out and remove the Verizon 5G equipment and put in AT&T 5G equipment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, presumably, it's like over time, right? Over time, we started with phones that were single band, and they became multi-band and quad band and octo-band, and then you get software-defined radios, and so things get better over time. But this idea that 5G is going to enable all kinds of stuff is a way looking down the road pipe dream that they're selling to investors.
So the 5G stuff is the box is going to be proprietary. Well, I guess cable boxes aren't they? So, I mean,
it's a different. It's
going to work with
a different deal. Here's a key piece, though, Randy, is when you're talking about a cable box, you're talking about a classic client-server network architecture. What we're talking about with 5G, if I understand it correctly, is effectively a mesh.
But this is an important point, Jay. Do you own because the cable box, theoretically you rent it. I don't know, maybe in some cases you can buy your own. But the point is, with this setup, are you going to rent the box that the receiver or receiver, right? Transceiver, actually, from Verizon or whoever it is, and then to speaking to your question, meaning you have to get Verizon to come and repossess their thing so that AT&T can come and install theirs. But are you just going to be, does anybody know even? Are we going to be renting these things, or can you buy one, in which case, like a phone, it would be nice if it did all of the specs at once?
Yeah, well, I think, what Michael just articulated is that the equipment, whether you buy it or rent it, is proprietary to XYZ Carrier's network, which is
Stupid.
180 degrees counter to the architecture of a mesh network, where you need interoperability, akin to email versus some sort of, we're going to set up our own proprietary email that, is only going to work within our XYZ Carrier system. And then if you want to switch your email, then you got to jump through a bunch of hoops. So anyway, yeah.
I think the problem is not just it's just the frequencies, because the different carriers have different licenses and they have different bands, but the technology, the 5G technology, is a standard.
The modulation is the same on everything. Too bad James isn't with us. He probably knows all about this stuff.
Or Andy, maybe.
Because, wait a minute, because that's interesting, because, of course, SDR could mean that you have a sort of an eSIM type arrangement where you've got this box as a generic box that does all the technology. That's just assuming that what you just said is true, and I don't know that for sure, for a fact, that all the protocol is all the same everywhere, just frequency difference. Do you know that for a fact, Corrado?
Well, telephony is all like that. There's 4G. It's a standard, but it's different.
No, that's
the
not.
frequencies are different.
CDMA and whatever the other thing is called aren't the same, so no.
Yeah. But that is all. That's all down to radio technology. It's nothing to do with the signaling within a system.
The protocol, exactly.
But you still need a chip. Does anybody even do CDMA anymore? I don't think. Verizon, when you had a Verizon phone, it didn't do anything else, right? Back in the day. So that's all I'm saying. I want to make sure that we're on the same wavelength here. No pun intended.
It's like discussing voice over IP. Voice over IP, the SIP protocol is a protocol, and it could run on an Ethernet connection or any other type of network. It's a different ISO level. That's the difference. I think 5G is a standard and can run on different frequencies, but it should be the same standard, the same protocol.
Okay.
So, Corrado, is this Wi-Fi 6 or whatever it is that associated with 5G, or is that just a separate initiative by the Wi-Fi?
A completely different thing by the Wi-Fi consortium, and is a completely different way of splitting channels, because channels are now also splitting during time. There was a video I watched from the guys, the Linus Tech Tips, that made a quite interesting video presenting Wi-Fi 6 with a number of pictures and graphics explaining in the three-dimensional space how traffic is split between clients in the Wi-Fi 6, and they did a live experiment. They have a 10 gig connection in the office, and from I think it was a Pixel 3, they had downloads and uploads in the hundreds of megabits per second from a mobile phone, 600 down and 800 up. So impressive.
I mean, all of that is wonderful. All that's wonderful, but there is still this reality that there's no such thing as a wireless network, right? And so, particularly if you look at the way the business has worked from the Cellco's point of view, they all sold off their towers, right? Every last one of them has sold off their towers. They now lease tower space and capacity back from Crown Castle. They built some towers since, But T-Mobile, in order to raise revenue, they sold their infrastructure essentially, and now they lease it back. So it's capex, OpEx instead of capex. But what this means that we're going to need so much fiber. I mean, okay, if you have lots and lots of these 5G cells, they may do some backhaul wirelessly betwixt themselves. They may mesh a fair bit, but you can't. I just can't believe that that's going to be universal. That it's all going to be wireless. I believe that somewhere it's going to have to hit fiber and transit sort of traditional networks.
It can be a mesh network because you need practically you need two devices. One that is a transceiver for the Wi-Fi network that you're creating, or the 5G coverage you're creating, and another that does the backhaul if you're using wireless. So
Right.
you're using two bands. You need to use two bands. You can't have that coexist in the same band, otherwise it clashes with all the traffic. We know,
and I think
mesh
I think we've
networks.
seen. We've seen that they have the spectrum resource, though. Spectrum is not in short supply. There's tons of spectrum. There's tons of undeployed spectrum, which is and they're moving up higher.
There's also a lot of dark fiber that has not been lit yet, but I know for a fact, because I worked with a mesh network to create a Wi-Fi coverage. Depending on at what stage you are, what repeater you are connected to, your bandwidth halves every time. So if you are on the first repeater, after the first stage, your available bandwidth is 25%. On the second repeater, you're at 25% of the bandwidth that is available at the very beginning. That's how mesh networks work. The only saving grace of a mesh network is that they are self-healing if they are meshed properly, and there are at least 2 points connected to every other point. In case one goes down, or there's a power cut, or there's an obstruction, or anything else. So that's the only advantage of a mesh network, but it's not performance, it's the resilience.
Well,
yeah.
I think there's also, we're judging things on sort of the constructs of the past, where yes, you do have to go into backhaul at some point. And, we come from this line-centric architecture, but to move back into the mesh networking, if there was truly a ubiquitous mesh or a construct that was completely interoperable, I'm questioning whether we really would need backhaul at that point, or whether we could basically have an alternative to backhaul via, point-to-point connectivity via laser optical connections and so forth. There are initiatives out there now, and a movement to move to truly mesh networking. There's a group that's called Offline First, and they actually go out into the wilderness where there is no connectivity, and they create their own connectivity and their own mesh networks.
But
there's something called
that is possible if you are in greenfield. So when there's no competition, there's no competing for bandwidth, there's no problems. When you get into semi-urban and urban areas, wireless is like elbowing into a very crowded tube station. It's difficult, very difficult to get through, and that's why the dark fiber and the fiber that is already lit in semi-urban and urban areas is vital to keep things connected. We need to use that. But again, a mesh network, the bigger it gets, the more resources it eats just to sustain itself. That's what I've seen from on the ground experience.
So there's another component to this mesh networking, which is the business model and the incentive structure. Because I think everything you're saying, Corrado, is true, that if you just try to go into a urban area and, you know, we're going to set up a mesh network and everybody's going to it's going to be kind of a collective community thing. There's no money, there's no financial or business models to drive the thing. But there are initiatives, and I'm looking at one right now called Althea Mesh, which is ALTHEA Mesh, where they're actually incentivizing people to become part of the mesh network by paying them cryptocurrency. And, you know, I think if you get both the technology, the business model, and the policy all dancing together, that's when things can really be ushered in that didn't work before, if that makes sense.
You need buy-in from the community also, and that sometimes is the most difficult thing to do. There's always the not in my backyard type of guy that breaks the mesh, and because standards and frequencies are always different throughout continents, it's very difficult to have a big player that can play the tune everywhere. So you either need a very large player that can deploy different devices in different frequency domains, big names like Ubiquiti or Cisco, or big guys. The small guy will always struggle, or will have to sit in its own backyard, playing with the limits of the technology and the legal framework in the continent or country they're working with. So economies of scale again become difficult.
Quick word. I asked Daniel if he wanted to come and say a couple of words about Kamailio World, since this is our last session before. So he will be popping in a second, apparently, if he can. Interesting. I mean, not a day goes by when I'm walking around this city where I don't see 3 or 4 trucks working on fiber. You know, they got the cover open and they're splicing fiber. I think, I don't know what percentage of this city is, I was going to say covered. I mean, there's fiber everywhere. But I don't know how many people are connected to it, but a lot. And that number's growing. It's fascinating because when I first moved here, this area, not this exact neighborhood, but the general region, we were asking when DSL was going to be available. I'm talking, you know, like over 10 years ago. And the view was, yeah, someday, maybe in 3 or 4 years. And just overnight, almost everybody had DSL, because where all the chateaux are, there's a lot of money up there. So they hooked it all up. And here's Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
Hi, Randy.
Are you nervous with this big event coming up? You've never done this before, right?
No, yeah. A bit, yeah, running around to put all things together, but otherwise, no big stress. Should be the same group of people, more or less, so we know each other. There are quite a lot of new people coming, actually, but I think at least half, they were at least one time in the past. So.
And the weather, Tim just put an alert on the wire room saying that the weather's gotten colder.
Yeah, that's true. So it's going to be maybe 12 to 15 degrees when it's sunny, but otherwise maybe 10. So
what are you complaining about? That's balmy. That's fantastic.
Scotland, right?
I'm in my shirt.
Yeah, so
Rob will be in his short sleeve shirt. Are there any new presenters? Because, you know, obviously every year a lot of the people who are based in Berlin or around it are there, and the gentleman from the actual the facility that you have the event at, I can never remember his name, but you know, the doctor, 5G or whatever we call him, he will be there presenting. But anybody brand new that you can think of right away?
Yeah, there are couple of guys new there. Let me check, because my memory running left and right here. It's
While you're checking, we generally also see SIPGate or one-on-one. They're both based around there. I don't know if one-on-one. I didn't see one.
Yeah, one is not presenting this year, but they have a big crew coming there. So I don't know, 5 people. So they have a big presence because they also contribute to Kamailio quite a lot of code. They have a team in Romania, so there are 2 guys coming from Romania and the rest from Germany. So they have a big presence as usual. They present maybe once every 3 years or so when they have something new to announce. Yeah, they are the second telecom still by size here, probably over 10, 11 millions connected phone numbers or something like that. That was when they presented 2 years ago, the numbers they gave. Otherwise, yeah, new, we have Shen McCord. Maybe people know him from usually AstriCon. He was also at ComCon last year.
ComCon last year, very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so it's doing a lot of deployments with containers like Docker orchestration with Kubernetes and so on. From France, brand new this year will be the Vazo team. I'm not sure how they will be in French.
I have to look them up. I'll have to look them up. I don't know who that is.
Sylvain Boilly.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, he was actually based in Canada for years. I don't know if he's.
Yes, and still the company, it's half-half. So they have also office in France, but probably the headquarters are in Canada. He was also in some past edition, but as a visitor. Now they come as a sponsor and they have a presentation. It's also an open source project trying to make it easy for people deploy the telephony platforms. So like a programmable platform for telecoms.
I have a very important question, Daniel. Do people have do the sponsors and the people who are going to be exhibiting and anyone who has T-shirts, have they got T-shirts? Anybody got T-shirts delivered? Because I want to know how many I should bring.
So we have our new color, which is
great.
not iron, but this would be the new color from Kamailio. Except one size, they couldn't make this color. So we have the navy blue for that size, which I'm not saying that there are not many using it, but
that would be small in my opinion.
No? Not really, but it's one of the extremes.
XXL.
Then yes, Nexmo will give away quite a lot of T-shirts. Probably not for all attendees, but 100 or so.
They have a nice adapter that has a USB thing and a.
Yeah.
They did. I don't know. They may not have it.
They have also. I haven't seen it because this delivery was arriving these days and was 1st of May, and I was to the venue before that, and they arrived just after. But they said they're gonna send also some adapters or these USB variants, you know.
Yeah, those are good. And you know who has great is Simon is speaking, isn't he? Simon Woodhead.
Yeah, Simon will probably bring also T-shirts. Fraser told us that he needs to deliver again a pack of them.
He has his T-shirts are among the best. But what he has that's really good is the big coffee cups and the big thermoses. I don't know if he'll have that every time, but Simon definitely has probably the best stuff of anybody ever at any of these conferences. They go the full route with it.
For sure, I heard about T-shirts. I'm not sure what else it's Simon bringing here, but T-shirts will be quite a lot. Then what would be quite interesting at this edition would be like 8 SNOME phones. Whoever still use the hard SIP phones on the desk, there will be kind of random picking sort of raffle. We'll decide how. Then another sponsor will give a Kindle and a couple of other gadgets. VUC750 from Italy. Who wants to get a chance to win the Kindle will have to fill an online survey about some billing technology. So they need some feedback about how people in telecom would like to get this billing platform and so on, especially on these distributed models with blockchains, as they try to focus, and they will have a presentation about this technology trying to use blockchain for exchanging tokens, billing information between providers. Then we'll have Poly, the new company Polycom, Plantronics and Polycom merge, and they rebranded in Poly.
Okay.
And
I suppress the urge to make a joke about crackers. But
Yeah,
okay.
really, Polly want a cracker. Exactly, exactly, Michael.
But we have Sherman, which was with Obihai. Obihai was first acquired by Polycom, then Polycom and Plantronics merged or whatever they did, and they rebranded maybe 1 month ago in just Poly, and they have the poly.com website. So I'm guessing Sherman will have also some devices to give around. So I'm sure there will be a lot of giveaways that everyone can pick from there and take home. We have also this kind of rucksack this time with Kamailio logo. That's sometimes handy, easy to pack if you are traveling light. So. Other presenters, looking at the new ones, we have a woman from UK, Yufei Tao. I met her a couple of times. She was also as participant, was in the community for a long time, and this time she's gonna present about her experiences with Kamailio along like 12 years within the project. Then Marcus, this time will be an interesting new session. He proposed it, Marcus from Seagate. It was always like in the attendees are many that have valuable information to share, but we have only limited time, and who is faster to submit a presentation or who feels like speaking properly for half an hour does it, but others are either shy or they don't get a chance. But we're sort of giving like 5 minutes. So whoever wants to shortly present about himself and the company and what they do with Kamailio or other open source projects in the real-time communication, they can do it, no question or so. It's mainly to prepare for discussing later during the cocktail party and so on, getting more information. As far as I know, there are already 6 or 7 people enrolled in that session.
That's great. I want to know if Corrado has any questions, because Corrado's a first timer, and also wanted to mention that the 2 Lorenzos are there. So
yeah, the second one is no longer coming. Actually, something popped up and had.
Who's the second one?
So Miniero is coming, Mangani is not coming. So Janus is coming, and for the Homer SIP capture presentation will be Federico Cabidu that replace it from the team.
And Sandro Goci, right, is also
Sandro, it's here. It's gonna come and have the presentation.
A lot of fascinating stuff for you, Corrado. You're gonna love it.
Well, yeah. Although it will be difficult because I've not been speaking Italian except with my wife for 14 years now. So the technology lingo in Italian is probably escapes me now. I'm probably 14 years behind with what they are describing stuff in Italian as.
It'll be a chance to catch up.
There is also another Italian, Giovanni, so you can Federico, it's also Italian that I mentioned before.
That's right,
so Giacomo, it's Italian, so I think we have a big bunch of Italians, so you'll feel like home.
Well, okay.
And there's an excellent pizza place that we went to last couple of years ago, actually. Huge place, right?
Okay.
I don't even remember where that is. I hope somebody else does.
With Dennis, or who was organizing that?
I don't remember. Yeah, it might have been Dennis.
When you get out there and you're having pizza with Lorenzo Miniero, you must urge him to try the
Best of the
pineapple on the pizza. You must have him get the pineapple on the pizza.
Please.
That's true.
Please.
Corrado puts haggis on his pizza.
That's delicious.
Isn't it good?
Yeah.
What would be also first time at Kamailio will be one guy from the free switch signal wire team. So typically they are not traveling to Europe. It's none of the major one, but it's a good engineer coming from them, Chris Rienzo.
Okay, not Michael Marvudis, not Squeaky Mike.
No, Mike he's coming at Kamailio World actually, but not presenting anything. And I don't think he did any presentation at Kamailio about free switch, and he's not much into engineering like coding or so, while Chris it's more into this kind of infrastructure coding, dealing with Kamailio and also free switch.
Mm-hmm.
And another guy from the signal wire team, it's coming, Dragos Mancha, which used to be with other companies before, but he did some module he worked a lot with Audio Opus codec in free switch in the past few years, as far as I remember.
Have you worked with Signal Wire and Kamailio, Daniel, in any way, or has anybody done anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, since the early TruePhone times, like 2006, I've been working with the free switch guys in many projects, and Kamailio and free switch are working fine together, and also with the Signal Wire, I collaborate in projects. So, I mean, it's always Kamailio alongside with free switch or Asterix, whatever the customer wants, we are happy to help with. At the end, it's SIP in between them, so
right,
it's open source and easy to combine.
Is there any anything on this is a uniquely American thing, I'm sure, but stir and shaken and the like?
No, we don't have anything. I was in US like 1 month and a half, so end of March, 20th of March, I was in US, and I met a couple of guys there, and they said it's a big thing there. And I understand, because as I buy SIM card, and even this time I was first in San Francisco, I bought the T-Mobile SIM card, and in like half an hour I got a call from an advertiser. So it's I understood it's a big thing to happen in one, or the major providers are already forced to verify the identity or things like that for mobile call.
It's starting to happen. They have the mobile carriers are being forced to basically accelerate their implementation to have something done this year.
Okay.
And it's funny to hear such things last month being discussed in the Senate and in the Congress and at the FCC, and sort of to hear non-technical people wielding these technical terms like they're magic bullets, which they are not. but there you have it. So, because something must be done, even if it's not effective.
Yeah, I met also a guy from this company that it's doing detection of this auto dialers, how it's called. I forgot the name. It's from New York. I'll have to remember. I had a discussion with him, and also with Armen from Dialpad. They were also looking at it. I'm not up to the full knowledge with the extension, because here in Europe it's not the pressure. We don't have this. It's as a major issue. I mean, you have some robocallers and these spoofing caller IDs, but very rare. And
Because
yeah,
you guys are a civilized society.
could be yes or not, who knows. On the other hand, there are some signature that you have to put there. So from Kamailio point of view, might be only some configuration scripting operation to check some headers, to sign and check, verify. But I can't give like definitive answer now. I have to look to the specs. I promised to the guys in US I collaborate with, I will do it, but after Kamailio World. So for me, the year starts after Kamailio World and ends with Kamailio World. So for me, it's like now, Christmas time. I'm busy with arranging party stuff. But yeah, should be addressed in a way or another in the near future.
I think it's. I think on the one hand, it's. There's a certain amount of folly to it because of the way it came about, but on the other hand, it's a business opportunity. It's something that's going to have to be done at the network edge coming into the US, which means for everybody who's sending traffic into the US, some kind of implementation will be anticipated, maybe. So it's a good business opportunity.
Okay, I think the company that I mentioned or the service in US is RoboKiller or something like that. So I met
There's a dozen or more of them. Yeah. So
yeah. I think this is the one I met a guy in the US recently and talk a bit about.
excellent.
Okay, so
Okay, Daniel, we'll see you in a couple of days, and thank you for joining us.
you're welcome. So we'll see you and Corrado and who else is here.
I assume James will be there. And that's
Hopefully yes, because he wanted 2 sessions this year. If not, we'll have.
All right. Thanks to Andy Smith, Corrado Mella, Jay Carpenter, Michael Graves, and Daniel. And we will see y'all real soon now.
Okay, enjoy the weekend.